Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, the dust has not settled after a wave of pager explosions across Lebanon.
Local media reports say the pagers simultaneously exploded across the country after being hacked by Israel.
Reports indicate that U.S. officials have confirmed Israel was responsible for the attacks, to which Hezbollah has vowed to respond with fair punishment. So how did it happen? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. Joining me is Justin Salhani, an Al Jazeera journalist based in Beirut. I spoke to him on Wednesday afternoon. Justin, thank you for joining The Take, especially on such a busy time. As we speak, there are reports of new explosions going off in Lebanon. Paint a picture for me of what's happened there over the past 24 hours, because videos show these sudden blasts going off in grocery stores, a market, a convenience store. What's been happening in the streets, in the hospitals? What have you seen?
I mean, the initial attacks caused just kind of chaos and panic. I had a friend tell me that he got a phone call and somebody told him, panicked that people are shooting and they don't know where from and they're hitting random targets. So at first it wasn't super clear. And then, as the news started to roll out, it became evident that these were pagers.
Hezbollah has called it one of the biggest security breaches since the group was formed. Emergency departments have been inundated with injured Hezbollah members and civilians.
Devices meant for communication were turned into bombs, exploding in the hands of hundreds of people, many Hezbollah members.
Just now, we're talking within the last half hour, there's been a second attack. It doesn't seem to be at this point as big as the first. At first, the reports were saying something along the lines of these are laptops, mobile phones, and things of that nature. Hezbollah has just denied that, according to their Telegram, basically saying that these were other sort of devices that were bought around the same time or potentially with the same batch as these exploding pagers. And if they were not connected to their batteries, if they were unplugged or the batteries were taken out, then they did not explode. Essentially, what I can tell you is that over the past 24 hours, hospitals have been overrun. Emergency workers, including doctors, etc., were called into work at various hospitals around the country. And just now, right before actually we got on here, I was talking to a communications officer at AUBMC, which is one of the largest and most prestigious hospitals in Lebanon and in Beirut, the capital. Told me that he had just gotten report of the second explosion and they were, he was running on the move to try to prepare for receiving more people.
Oh, wow. So I want to make sure I got this straight. The attack that took place on Tuesday in Lebanon involved pagers. But Wednesday, it's not pagers. It seems like it's electronic devices, laptops, other things that exploded. Is that right?
So from my understanding from the people that I've heard from and spoken to, the people who had and were using pagers, if for some reason they did not explode, anyone who still had one had probably thrown it away.
Mm-hmm.
So today, at first, the initial reports said laptops, phones, and things of that nature. Hezbollah denied that and said it was other types of devices. And so I think predominantly walkie-talkies, other electronic devices with the lithium batteries. And the theory, according to experts I've spoken to and other media reports that have been published, have said that Hezbollah's supply line was compromised. Of course, we haven't mentioned this yet, but Hezbollah blames Israel. So does the Lebanese government. Hezbollah has vowed to respond. The Israeli government has not made a statement yet on this event, but I think that's where all eyes are looking at the moment.
Yeah, we'll talk about what that retaliation could look like in a bit, but I want to talk about the casualties because this happened in public areas, like we said, grocery stores, on the streets. I saw the aftermath in cars where these pagers exploded. What do we know about what the death toll is looking like? Who was killed? Who was injured?
Yeah, so the death toll at this point in time, I think the last one I had seen was about 8 or 9 different people. Among them were reported Hezbollah members as well as other civilians, 2 children. This attack went off around the country, so it's hit different geographical regions and Syria as well. So there were at least wounded people as well in Syria. We can say that, this was in the middle of the day. So there were people checking out at the grocery store. There was one video that went viral of a guy checking out at the grocery store. Another one was shopping for fruit. There were reports in other media of people who were driving. And, this leads to a level of psychological terror because people walking around living their daily lives and suddenly somebody driving a car or a motorbike just beside you has an exploding appendage, might lose control of their vehicle. So there was a much wider effect beyond just, an extreme close targeting.
What you're describing, by all accounts, has been a shocking incident. The fact that it happened simultaneously in different places, the fact that it happened via exploding pagers, and that's especially notable given that Hezbollah recently started using these pagers instead of smartphones out of security concerns.
As you said, a few months ago, Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah told members, but even, other people, stop using cell phones because they can be tracked, they can be targeted. And so people have shifted to other ways of communicating. These pagers were bought, it seems, a few months ago. I think 4 or 5 months ago is what's been reported. This has been a way to avoid being targeted by the Israelis who apparently were able to hack the telecommunication systems. What we know about this, the things that have been reported generally in the media, is that this was a Taiwanese company, and there was a third-party company that had somewhere along the line been involved in either the production line or the manufacturing or something of that nature that was based in Hungary. Things that I've read have said that they didn't have a strong physical presence. And then there's a lot of other little details that have been reported that are just very hard to verify at this point in time. But it seems like Israel or another ally at some point was able to infiltrate that supply line. So what that means for Hezbollah now is they have to sit down and rethink their entire supply line, as well as most likely their entire communication system.
Theories abounded on Tuesday after the pager attacks about how this could happen. As of Wednesday, what do we know specifically about how this happened?
There have been some experts that said that there were explosives placed inside the pager, and that led to most likely something sending a code that would have then forced the pagers to explode. The fact that they were operational for months means they would have had to pass certain regulations, certain inspections, and would have had to be working. So it was a very sophisticated attack, and one that certainly stretches the imagination, right? Because if they can start infiltrating or accessing this sort of technology, this is just the first step. And we have to start thinking about beyond this current dynamic, how, what other sort of actors might be looking for this kind of technology.
After the break, what could this mean for tensions in Lebanon? So, Justin, you mentioned Hezbollah and the Lebanese government have blamed Israel for this attack. Several U.S. media outlets are citing U.S. officials who have come out since and said Israel was behind it as well. What do we know about that claim of responsibility, and why now?
Media has reported that Defense Minister of Israel, Gallant, had spoken to Lloyd Austin, his American counterpart, and essentially let them know very shortly before the attack happened that something was going to happen, but they didn't tell them exactly what it was. I think this is kind of a pattern that's played out a few times where Israel has launched an attack, given the US maybe a heads up, but not full details of what was going on. Why now? There's been an intensification. I mean, this is a conflict that has been going on for 11 months now, right? Even going back to before this period, before last October, there were certain figures inside Israel that were kind of having this very, let's say, fiery rhetoric, essentially threatening Beirut at different times, threatening to send Lebanon back to the Stone Age. Immediately after October 7, there was talks about how to react to Hezbollah, talks of a potential invasion or the need to deal with the threat on the northern border, fear that, Hezbollah might launch a similar operation to what Hamas had done on October 7th. So this has been going on for a long time. There's been threats throughout this current iteration of the conflict. And in August, we saw the most intense exchange of attacks for the past, year.
There's been a major escalation in the war of attrition between Hezbollah and Israel. Israel resumed targeting what it says are Hezbollah sites, hours after Hezbollah carried out its retaliation for the killing of one of its top military commanders.
And then there was sort of a return to the status quo. But on the Israeli side, the rhetoric was still very high. And there was talks about moving forces north. There's been talks from different analysts that, the Israelis are trying to figure out what to do here. And this might be a way to try to push Hezbollah and say, okay, call it, step back, let's end this war here. At that moment, at the same time, we're still waiting for how Hezbollah may choose to respond. And if Israel, again, the second attack just happened. So will there be a third? We're still waiting to find out and see.
So waiting on tenterhooks to figure out whether there'll be another attack, waiting to see what Hezbollah's response will be, because they have said they're going to issue a fair punishment to Israel in response. What is the feeling like on the ground in Beirut with people who have been living with this heightened escalation for these 24 hours, but for the past 11 months?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to speak in the name of an entire people because obviously there's a wide spectrum of feelings. I think a lot of people are fed up and tired of the constant uncertainty. I think there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of mistrust. People are looking for spies and agents all around, and they're not sure really what's going on. At the same time, I spoke to somebody this morning who was waiting outside AUBMC, and he told me, in his opinion, it was a stupid attack. He mentioned that, a number of civilians were hurt in this process, and that fear was the furthest thing from his mind, that, they're principled people, they're strong people. So I think there's a real wide range. There are people who are scared. There are people who have suffered serious injuries, who have lost eyes, who have lost fingers, who have had abdominal injuries, who have had other sort of, physical deformations. This will be something that Hezbollah will have to go and think about in terms of how they respond strategically, tactically, politically, how they reassure their own people. At the same time, particularly people in South Lebanon have shown an incredible resilience over time. And I think, there will be among them who, appreciate and will celebrate that resilience. And there will be others who are just fed up and want to be able to go back to living, to farming, to, visiting neighbors, to having their daily life. People here have been dealing with a lot, through this last year. Obviously, it doesn't compare to what's happened in Gaza, for that matter. But, it's also a situation that has been going on way longer than last year as well. There's been uncertainty. There's been economic crisis since 2019. Instability is a thing for as long as I've been in Lebanon, in and out of Lebanon, and as long as my family's been here as well. There's been waves of great periods and there's been waves of tough periods. That makes it something that is hard to build a stable life. And a lot of people are feeling that way today.
Well, I want to end on a personal note because I know you have your reporter hat on, but as someone who has lived in Lebanon for a while and been in and out reporting, does this feel like something new, a new stage in this war? Are you feeling heightened tensions yourself personally?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm not sure if I can answer it because it still feels really early. I mean, yesterday's attack and today's attack feel quite surreal. There have been other times where I think I felt a bit more fearful, a bit more on tenterhooks. Today, it's really set in, and I'm not sure we know the implications because I think these sort of implications spread beyond Lebanon. They make me think about, this device that's sitting in front of me that I'm recording on. How secure is it? How safe is it?
Yeah.
Even though Hezbollah came out and said these were probably particular batches of devices that were infiltrated, this is a new thing. And as other journalists have reported in the past, that typically when Israel commits certain operations, because they have such a sophisticated intelligence and technological capabilities, there are other actors around the world, potentially actors, autocratic actors, actors who maybe people don't trust, or who have, internal or external enemies, who may be looking for that kind of technology as well. So, at the end of the day, this is something that I think affects people way beyond Hezbollah, way beyond the Lebanese, way beyond just the region, way beyond the country. And, that'll be something that we're dealing with for years and years to come. I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking back on this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, seeing that this was a dynamic changing moment for the way that various actors in conflict behave.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Ashish Malhotra, Marcos Bartolomé, Khaled Soltan, and Chloe K. Lee, with Hisham Abu Salah, Hagir Saleh, Shraddha Joshi, Duha Mosaad, Cole van Miltenburg, Phillip Lanos, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.